Welcome to another episode of Courageous Conversations Live. I'm your host, Pierre Quinn, and here on Courageous Conversations, we're leveraging the stories of creatives, of entrepreneurs, of leaders to help you live and lead with greater courage. Joining me on this episode of Courageous Conversations is Keith Meyerson. Keith, thanks for being my guest today.
Oh, my pleasure, Pierre. Thanks for having me.
Now, as you're stopping the scroll, as you're watching this, you're trying to figure out what's going on. Courageous Conversations is the space and place for these life-changing, really life-changing leadership conversations. So here's what you need to do real quick. Hop in the comment section. Let us know you're watching. We'd love to give you a shout out. Hit that share button so that you don't keep all this good leadership advice to yourself. And if you have a question or comment, or when you have a question or comment, throw it in the comment section, and we'll answer as many as we can before our time runs out. Okay, Keith, give us the snapshot, the cliff notes, the elevator pitch, the 60-second commercial version of who you are and what you do.
In a nutshell, I'm Senior Director of Talent and OD for American First Finance. And what I do is help people succeed. A lot of that is training. And I know that's what we're talking about, the truth about training. But more holistically, it's learning, performance, succession, and kind of connecting the dots and helping people be successful professionally, but also having those light bulb moments and helping them personally as well. So it's it's an interesting ride. It's not something, my guidance counselor in high school said, "Hey, this is an opportunity you should pursue," right? I think a lot of us in this space kind of fall into it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm no different.
So, Keith, give us sort of that 35,000-foot view of the timeline. And how did you go from a career in military service? And we thank you for your service. How did you go from military service to this OD training and development empowerment role, that career that you've been in for the last several years?
Happenstance, right? So a couple of my jobs in the Marine Corps, I was an intelligence analyst, and I had a secondary military specialty of water survival instructor. So I found myself on stage a lot, in front of people, either giving presentations or training. So really, it was the combination of two. So when I got out of the Corps and I went back, I got my undergrad in sociology. And then at the time, I was working in training and development at Tiffany Company, and I was there for almost 11 years. And one of my mentors at Tiffany had his doctorate in OD, and I was just mesmerized by the impact he had on me as I was going through a leadership development course. And I thought, this is awesome. How do I do this, right? How can I affect people the way he's affecting me? And I thought about an MBA, and he dissuaded me. He said, look, everybody that goes for a master's, the large percentage of those people that aren't specializing have MBAs. And if you wanted to differentiate yourself, you should really look at something within the OD field. So then I got my master's in leadership and organizational effectiveness. So that kind of set the path for me. So I left Tiffany to really run L&D for a private company. Moved to Texas to run L&OD for Neiman Marcus for a couple of years, and then I was in consulting, and I've had the pleasure of working with some great organizations: United Airlines, Kohler Manufacturing, Susan G. Komen, and just really enjoyed, again, kind of connecting the dots and helping people succeed. And got out of consulting and am back running the show of OD for an organization and working with a team. That way, it's not just creating something and leaving, it's creating something and helping to realize the impact on people in the business as well.
We got Rain Martin checking in with us, a great coach, good in a Courageous Conversations alum too. She's been on the show as well.
Great.
Rain, thanks for checking in with us, saying what's up to us this morning. So I got to ask you, we had a previous conversation, Keith, and thanks so much for being willing to have that conversation with me. You said that in many cases, when we're looking at training, developing, nurturing, coaching our people, one of the mistakes that we make is that we first ask, what's the training program that fits our budget, or who can we get, or who could we squeeze in? Why is that a terrible first question to ask, as opposed to doing the strategy work and seeing of what's looking at what's really going on.
I think there's a couple reasons why I have issues with that. And one is selfish,
Mm,
to be quite candid. What I don't want to do is create a training intervention when that wasn't the right intervention to begin with. So the example, and I think I shared this with you, I had a CHRO came to me once and said that they were having challenges with their customer satisfaction scores and
mhm,
wanted to know if I could create a training program to help them. And I said, sure. Give me an example. What category is the lowest performing category? And she said friendliness. And I'm not a poker player, so I had to keep a straight face. And I asked her, just to clarify the request here, are you asking me to create a training program to teach adults how to be nice to one another? And she said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I said, okay, I'm glad we're in agreement here. Can I ask you a couple questions? And then I started to probe a little bit. What does friendliness mean to you? What are the behaviors associated with that? Have we created behavioral interviewing guides and trained hiring managers on how to see if candidates have those competencies? Are we onboarding for that? Are we developing? Are we performance managing? And you could see her head spinning. And she said, this is a bigger problem than training. And I said,
mhm,
absolutely. Because for me, if I created a training program, I know it would fail because it is only part of the solution. It is not the solution.
mhm,
So I think that's the key important component is we really have to get to the root cause. And too many times people just want to throw training at something,
mhm,
right? And I, I'm a firm believer in the medical model to help people understand this. I didn't walk into my doctor's office and say, "Hey, doc, I need a discectomy at L4, L5." He would have thought I was nuts, right? What do? We go to the doctors. Why are you here? My back hurts. What does a doctor do? He asks some questions. He might do some tests, and then he provides a diagnosis and then a range of treatments, right? He could have said, take some ibuprofen, or maybe some steroids, or maybe ice, or maybe you get steroid shots, or ultimately maybe you need surgery. And I think that's our role in LNOD as well. Is
mhm.
we want to solve the problem. We don't want to solve the symptoms because we don't want to have to keep replaying the same challenge over and over again. So it's a great place for us to really help the organization understand all the different things that need to come together to solve or to put together the right intervention.
We got another leadership coach checking in with us, Antonio Lennon. He says, I'm absolutely inspired. And Rain says, it is so important to address the right problem. And sometime people who are closest to it need some support in uncovering it. Keith, you have some people who are thinking, because the training and development space, it's a $1 billion industry.
Mhm.
And there are some people who hang their hats out as consultants, as trainers. This is their life's blood. This is how they make their money. And they're thinking, wait, what if I do an investigation? What if I ask some questions? And instead of from the outset just pushing my particular training program, what if we ask questions and I discover I'm not the answer, or I don't have the solution, and I have to and I know it becomes a question of ethics, right? But there are some people who say, how can we help people see that the greater asset is the discovery and brainstorming and assessing of what's really going on, as opposed to kind of just pushing your briefcase of offerings?
I think it's like that in any field, right?
Yeah.
That's why we talk about consultative selling, right? If you're gonna, we're all here on LinkedIn. How many of us are receiving 10 or more business development requests a day,
Yeah.
with people not even knowing if I need their services or not, right? So that's the first part. How do these people get introduced to organizations, and then how do you find out what the need is? I
Mhm.
think, but ultimately, if you're pushing your solution that might not be the right solution, you're going to damage your brand.
Mm.
And I think from a long-term perspective, it's probably not the wisest thing to do. But to come in from a consultative approach and say, hey, look, I want to help you solve your problem once and for all, whatever that problem is. And then, if you're hanging up your own shingle, it's having that wide, diverse network of people that you can bring in. So it's
Yeah.
it's the same thing when I always tell my instructors, you don't have to know the answer to every question. And you almost get more buy-in when you say, you know what, that's a great question. I'm going to have to research that. Let me get back to you. It's almost the same thing with a client. I would sell it as I have the right resources to devote to solving your problem. What I do as the program manager, as the face to face, I'm going to come in and actually find out what are all the interconnected areas? What are all the obstacles that are preventing you from achieving your short and long term goals? That's another way to approach it,
Mhm.
other than well, we can still use the medical model. I can still walk into the doctor and the doctor can say, well, are you looking to just get healthy enough to go on this vacation? Or do you want to be able to do somersaults with your grandkids, right? Because that might be two
Right.
different approaches that, what do I need to do to get you solved enough right now? Or are we really looking to fix holistically the issue? Because I think the organizations or people then are armed with enough information to make educated decisions. So
Mhm.
as a consultant, I could come in and say, hey, look, here are the 50 things that you need to address. I can now help you prioritize those because there's no way you're going to eat the elephant, right?
Yeah.
And most organizations aren't going to have the appetite, whether it's from resources, whether it's financial or human, or just timing perspective. So I think they need our guidance to help push them in the right direction, but at the right pace.
The title of this session is The Truth About Training. There's so many organizations out there, leaders, teams, and you've worked with them before, I'm sure you have, where they get upset when the training doesn't fix the thing. Like, it just we had a training about that. We spent $5,000 per employee to teach them this methodology, and 3 months later, we're still dealing with this same thing. Can you put training, and I know you did it before, but can you take a bit of a deeper dive and put in the life cycle of an organization and the overall health and development of organization where training components actually belong and how we should view them?
I think if I had the answer to that, I'd solve a lot more problems than just what we're talking about today. I
Yeah.
think that's an ongoing issue for most organizations, right?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of things that go into that. Does the leadership understand what training can and cannot do? Where does training sit within the organization? I've seen training sit within HR. I've seen it sit within ops. I've seen it sit under finance.
Mm.
So it really depends upon where it is. A lot of times, business leaders are looking for short-term fixes. They want to see the KPIs impacted immediately, and they're not willing to put in the investment because they don't understand. So I did at it's actually the same organization that I'm not mentioning, uh,
Mhm.
that I worked with. I worked for. I ran L&OD. They had problems with leadership teams at their locations, and I actually ran these self-sustaining team building workshops, and it was based on Patrick Lencioni's five dysfunctions of a team. And
Mhm.
I did pre-assessments, and I did post-assessments, and I did the workshops, and we were able to show that the impact on sales on those teams that went through the workshops was 5 times greater than those teams that didn't go through the workshops.
Mm.
So having had the luxury of being able to isolate the impact of training on a business metric is crucial. And I think that's the holy grail that a lot of training people struggle with. We're so focused on, the 5 levels of Kirkpatrick. The business could care less about Kirkpatrick, right? That's a training terminology. The
Mhm.
business wants their problem solved. So we need to be able to isolate our impact so finance doesn't come in and say, well, we changed the the formula for how we adjust profit margins. Sales doesn't come in and say, well, we hired new salespeople. Marketing doesn't come in and say, well, no, this is all due to us because we had a new PR campaign. So getting the ability and the buy-in to have pilots and control groups is critical, but a lot of organizations don't allow us the time to do that. If
Yeah.
they did, we could actually show how we impact the bottom line, and then we get that blank check, right? Then you're going to get the support from those the business operations to say, hey, I know these programs work because I have the data to show that, and then that just helps promote it. So that, to me, that's the key driver in being able to help organizations understand the value of training, what training can do.
You have so many years of experience of being effective. You mentioned Tiffany and Company. You mentioned Neiman Marcus. I mean, you're dropping these receipts of credibility here on Courageous Conversations Live. Can you share with us a story? And of course, the name, the company, whatever has to be anonymous if it needs to be, but a story of working with an organization, maybe one of your previous employers, where you after a longer period of time, after not just the training program, but the analysis, the strategy, the rollout, the follow up, where you walked away from that project and you said, this is why I do this work. This is the outcome that I look for.
I, the first thing that comes to mind, I believe this is something that I've previously shared with you. In every organization that I'm a part of, I teach a class called Decision Making and Root Cause Analysis. And again, as I mentioned previously, it's selfishly, right? So I can help people start to understand training doesn't solve all your issues. We really need to find out what the problem is. And I sell this from people. It's usually a teaser at the beginning of a class. I'll say, show of hands, how many people think 80% turnover is a problem? Everybody's hand goes up every time. And I look at them and I'll say, yeah, that's turnover's not your problem. And you get this crazed look on their face, right? What do you
Mhm.
mean turnover's not the problem? What's causing the turnover is the problem. And then the light bulb moments start going.
Yeah.
So, and this is something I took away from my graduate studies, and it's a course, a 6-week course that I condensed into a 3-hour workshop. But one of my favorite moments was when I was at Neiman Marcus and I was teaching a group of managers this class. Afterwards, one of the managers came up to me and she said, I'm quitting my job. And I was horrified. I'm like, oh my God, how did I just dissuade someone? That's not why I'm here. She's like, no, I've just realized that this stuff makes so much more sense to me. And I want to learn more and I want to do more and I want to go back to college and I want to get into, and I'm like, I'm already trying not to cry at this point, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm
Yeah.
like, it's very rare. And I think that's kind of I used to act. I acted in high school, acted in college. I've been an extra in some major movies, right? I love being up on stage and acting. And I think it's because you get that immediate reaction from the audience that you don't get, elsewhere. And I think standing up in front of a classroom and being able to impact someone's life like that, and it's not just the light bulb moment, oh, they understand the concept, I can now go apply it. But this was to an extreme. It's like, oh, I'm changing my life based on what you taught me, which I think is very rare for any of us to experience as facilitators. But I think that's why I feel that that course alone is something that every L&D team needs to be able to teach within an organization, because it does really help. It helps our cause, but you also get people thinking now of, okay, is this a symptom or is this a problem? That's what I try to teach people, right? Separate symptoms from problem. It's peeling the onion. Keep asking, it's why, right? Turnover is a problem. Well, why is turnover a problem? Okay. And now let's look at get it into its smallest parts, and now we can put an action plan together to start addressing that. And if we're talking, let's just talk turnover as an example. Well,
Mhm.
what do we do? Okay, do we have a leadership development program so we know our leaders and managers are actually treating people the way they should? Crazy, right? Are we teaching our managers how to interview? Have we defined the values and the competencies and the behaviors that of people that we want to onboard. And then I'm not saying everyone needs to be like us. We need
Right.
diversity, right? We need diversity of thought and experience, but are their core values the same? And I think those are the things, those are the programs that I believe have the opportunity to make a significant impact with an organization and make me feel like I'm adding value.
I told you. I told you. You're watching this live. You're watching the replay of this. I told you that Keith was going to drop some things, and you're now scrambling now for a piece of paper and a pencil to write down what he just said. You're going to have to go back and watch the recording, or even better yet, you should probably reach out and get connected to Keith. Keith, I call this part of Courageous Conversation shameless plug time. There's your LinkedIn profile. There's social media. Who are you looking to most connect with now, and what are the ways that people can reach out and get in touch with you?
So I'm not in consulting. I actually run L&OD, talent and OD for my organization. So I'm not selling any service. I like connecting and collaborating and helping. So if there are people that feel, anything I have to say is worthwhile, then I'm more than happy to let people pick my brain and we can chew over issues or talk about potential solutions. I just like to be a resource for people. So I'm not here to shamelessly plug anything other than I'm happy to help anyone that would like to do that. I would like to try to stay away from is people trying to sell me services. But I'm here to offer thought leadership if people feel it's valuable.
And I know from personal experience, I reached out to Keith. I had an idea I was working on. He gave me some great feedback and some perspective. So listen, folks, in our growth and our maturation and our journey as a leader, there every so often there'll come along people who genuinely want to help and connect and really aren't looking for anything in return, but to know that they're actually genuinely helping and connecting with people. And Keith is one of those individuals. So click on that LinkedIn profile, get connected, reach out to him. Maybe if you're watching this on Facebook and YouTube and you're saying, I don't have a LinkedIn profile. Well, that might be your first problem. Get your LinkedIn profile and then reach out to Keith and learn some more of his insight, his perspective, and get some deeper insight on the actual truth about training. Keith, it's been great having you for this past 22 minutes or so on Courageous Conversations Live. Thanks for hanging out today and for being my guest.
Oh, thanks for including me. I always enjoy having these conversations. I appreciate it.
Looking forward to our next conversation. Take care.
Absolutely.